Imagine this. In one single night, an army of 185,000 soldiers, the strongest warriors of the mighty Assyrian Empire, falls without a single blade raised by their enemy. It sounds almost mythical, doesn't it? Yet, this is the tale of an angel, a divine force that struck down the undefeatable, right when all hope seemed lost. In a world where military might meant everything, this act shattered every understanding of power. But what if I told you that this was more than just a miracle? What if this event held a deeper message, one that transcends centuries, teaching us about faith, protection, and the unseen forces that move through our lives? Here's where the story gets even more astonishing. This angel, sent by God, didn't just win a battle. It altered the fate of an entire city and proved that no army, no king, could match divine strength. For anyone who has felt overwhelmed by forces beyond their control, this story resonates deeply, showing that with faith, even the impossible can bend in your favor. Are you ready to discover the hidden power behind this ancient tale and the ways it could still be speaking to us today? Imagine an army so vast that its mere presence felt like the end of the world for anyone in its path. This was the reality in 701 Sorsiner, when Jerusalem was under threat from a powerful Assyrian army. Men, women, and children were gripped by fear, feeling the weight of impending doom. Yet, in the silence of the night, something extraordinary happened. An angel sent by God intervened, and by dawn 185,000 Assyrian soldiers lay dead. How could such a miracle occur in a single day? To grasp the magnitude of this event, visualize the immense camps of the Assyrian Empire stretching as far as the eye could see. The soldiers, hardened by battles and feared by nations, represented an unstoppable force. However, on that particular night, an angel acted as God's instrument, striking down the soldiers without the clash of swords or cries of battle. It was an eerie silence that greeted the dawn, leaving Jerusalem untouched. What power could command such an outcome? The people of Jerusalem, facing the full might of an empire, had braced themselves for the worst. Supplies were running low, hope was waning, and every glance toward the horizon signaled the inevitable. But Hezekiah, the king of Judah, held firmly to his faith, refusing to let fear dominate his heart. In a single prayerful moment, he sought divine intervention, and God responded. The arrival of this angel was more than a miracle. It was a promise that faith, even in despair, would be answered. Picture that moment: Jerusalem, tense and on edge, with the shadow of the Assyrian army looming. Then, imagine the utter shock when morning came, revealing that their enemies had been defeated overnight. The angel didn't just kill soldiers. This was a profound message from God to all who witnessed it. Power, armies, and empires are insignificant against the will of the divine. It's a reminder that even when our backs are against the wall, God's strength can turn the tides in a single day. People must have struggled to believe their eyes, seeing that vast army reduced to nothing without a single sword lifted in Jerusalem's defense. What does this mean for us today? There are battles we face that seem insurmountable, where every logical plan fails and hope is scarce. But here's the lesson. When human strength falls short, divine intervention steps in. An angel, unseen yet powerful, can still shift the course of what seems impossible. How might faith change the way we approach our own challenges? This story didn't just stay in the pages of ancient texts. Throughout history, people recount tales of miraculous rescues, moments when events defy all reason, leaving behind the unmistakable mark of divine intervention. The single day in Jerusalem is one of those moments, urging us to think beyond mere human effort. It's a tale of God's sovereignty and the mysterious, unseen forces at work in the world, reminding us of the power that faith taps into. If one angel could do this, what limits does divine power really know? Think about the fear that must have filled the hearts of Jerusalem's people. They were facing death, defeat, and enslavement all at once. And then, in one night, that fear was swept away by the unseen work of an angel. It's almost like life's greatest problems vanish when we place them in God's hands. For them, it was a physical army. For us, it could be challenges at work, health issues, or strained relationships. Could there be an angel waiting to work for us if only we asked? The sheer number, 185,000 soldiers, is staggering. In today's terms, that's a stadium filled to capacity, wiped out in the blink of an eye. Yet the real marvel is the quiet efficiency of it all. No loud battles, no chaotic struggle, just the silent, overwhelming power of an angel sent by God. It makes you wonder, what other ways might God be working quietly in our lives? Unseen, yet powerful. Solving problems we didn't even know he was handling. What's truly awe-inspiring here is the message that lingers. This wasn't just an act of protection, it was a lesson in divine authority. When God's purpose is involved, no force, no soldier, no threat stands a chance. It's easy to feel small in the face of life's challenges. But stories like these remind us that we are never alone. There's an angel, or perhaps just the unseen hand of God, moving on our behalf. Maybe faith is our link to that same unstoppable power. The story of the angel who killed 185,000 soldiers in one night isn't just history. It's a beacon for anyone facing what feels impossible. When Jerusalem was at its weakest, divine intervention made it victorious. Just as Hezekiah called out, we too can call on that higher power. How often do we forget that faith can move mountains? That one single day can change everything when God's hand is at work. And this is just the beginning. Jerusalem's victory was more than an isolated miracle. The Assyrian Empire, under King Sennacherib, was a force like no other. Picture a nation so dominant that its name alone struck terror across lands far and wide. Its soldiers were trained not just in warfare but in the brutal art of psychological intimidation. Kingdoms trembled as Assyria advanced, leaving behind a legacy of conquest and terror. Sennacherib wasn't just a ruler, he was a symbol of power that seemed unstoppable, making it all the more shocking when an angel of God struck down his army in a single day. The Assyrians had built their reputation on ruthlessness, wielding fear as effectively as their swords. They didn't just conquer, they crushed, enslaving nations and imposing their brutal rule without mercy. To be in their path was to know a fate almost worse than death. Yet, despite their unparalleled military might, one angel was all it took to bring them down. It's a reminder that even the strongest earthly power is no match for the divine. Could this be a lesson for us today, showing the limits of human dominance? As King Sennacherib's forces closed in on Jerusalem, they were sure of victory. After all, they had defeated every kingdom that stood in their way. The Assyrian army wasn't just massive in size, it was skilled, disciplined, and fueled by a confidence born from countless victories. But in one night, the tables turned. An angel, unseen yet unstoppable, killed 185,000 soldiers. The power of God proved greater than even the fiercest warriors, leaving the Assyrians with a memory of defeat they couldn't understand. Imagine the Assyrian camps on that fateful night. They must have seemed like an impenetrable fortress, with soldiers resting assured of their strength. To them, this was just another victory waiting to be claimed. But as the angel of God moved silently through their camp, the mighty army crumbled without a single weapon raised by their enemy. This wasn't just a defeat. It was a message that no matter how powerful, earthly empires fall before divine will. How often do we forget that earthly strength is fleeting? The story of the Assyrian Empire's power and its sudden fall resonates because it defies all logic. Sennacherib, who had laughed at the gods of other nations, now faced an outcome he could never have foreseen. His empire, built on might and fear, was helpless against one angel. It's a humbling thought for anyone who feels invincible, showing that human power has limits. Even today, empires, leaders, and corporations stand tall, yet history shows they all fade when up against a power beyond understanding. Sennacherib's empire had always leaned on its military to sustain its reign. Assyrian soldiers were fierce, trained from youth, and loyal beyond question. They didn't just follow orders, they embodied a mission to expand and dominate. Yet that night, all their training, their strategies, and their sheer numbers meant nothing. This one divine act of intervention was a dramatic shift, turning their power into dust. It makes one wonder, if even the strongest armies fail, what does that say about where true security lies? While history often remembers Assyria's brutality, it's this miraculous defeat that continues to capture attention. Sennacherib, a king who had everything, suddenly realized that human strength couldn't guarantee victory. This wasn't just about the loss of soldiers, it was a blow to his empire's very identity. What's left for any ruler when their might is proven vulnerable? Today, we see powerful entities rise and fall, and it's easy to forget that history has always shown a higher power at play. This fall of the Assyrian Empire is a classic example of overconfidence meeting an unexpected end. Sennacherib had mocked the idea of Jerusalem's God, believing his gods to be stronger. The idea that a single angel could dismantle his army must have shattered his understanding of strength. The Assyrians had been certain of their victory, but in one single day, that certainty was erased. How often do we rely on our own might, only to find that there's always a force greater than our own? The Assyrians, who had been unstoppable, now faced a lesson that power without humility can lead to disaster. Sennacherib had built his empire on fear, but in that moment, it was his army that experienced terror like never before. No human army, no matter how mighty, could stand against a divine command. For all his arrogance, Sennacherib had to confront a truth that echoed through history. No ruler can truly reign without respect for the power that exists beyond their control. The Assyrian defeat wasn't just a victory for Jerusalem, it was a statement to the world. Kingdoms near and far heard of the single day when God intervened and humbled an empire. This wasn't merely a battle lost, it was a reputation forever changed. Even today, this story stands as a reminder of where ultimate power lies. And so, we see that even the mightiest of empires can fall in an instant. What, then, could this mean for us as we face our own modern giants? Jerusalem, under the reign of King Hezekiah, was a city of faith and tradition, but also one that now faced the imminent threat of the Assyrian Empire. As Sennacherib's forces advanced, the people of Jerusalem saw doom on the horizon, with no earthly way to escape. The Assyrians were notorious for their military strength, and even the walls of Jerusalem seemed too fragile against such power. Yet, in the darkest hours, hope was not lost. The city clung to its faith, believing that God would intervene. The siege of Jerusalem wasn't just a military maneuver, it was psychological warfare. The Assyrians knew how to break down their enemies, not just with weapons, but with fear. Soldiers taunted the people from outside the walls, ridiculing their faith and their trust in God. For many in Jerusalem, it must have felt like a test of both strength and belief. Yet Hezekiah urged them to hold firm, to resist despair. In moments like these, it was clear that Jerusalem's true strength was its unwavering spirit. Hezekiah was no stranger to the power of the Assyrians. He understood the odds. The king had prepared his city as best as he could, strengthening its walls, conserving resources, and uniting his people. But he knew that human defenses would only take them so far. Faced with an army that seemed unstoppable, Hezekiah turned his focus upward, trusting in divine intervention. It's a reminder that sometimes preparation and strategy meet their limit, and only faith remains. Could there be a lesson here about knowing when to rely on something beyond ourselves? While the Assyrians sneered and mocked, Hezekiah's faith grew stronger. He encouraged his people to pray, to seek God's guidance, and to remember the stories of old, stories of how God had delivered his people time and again. The siege was as much a battle of beliefs as it was of armies. Hezekiah stood as a symbol of hope for Jerusalem, a king who looked to God rather than earthly alliances for rescue. In every word he spoke, he reminded his people that there was more at play than met the eye. The fear among the people was intense, and rightfully so. Surrounded, outnumbered, and facing an enemy known for brutality, Jerusalem's citizens must have felt their hope slipping away. They could hear the sounds of the Assyrian army encamped around them, like a storm waiting to break. Yet, as they prayed and looked to Hezekiah's example, they found strength. This wasn't just about surviving a siege. It was about proving that faith could stand firm even in the face of utter darkness. Inside the walls, Jerusalem was transformed into a place of prayer and quiet resilience. Hezekiah and his people gathered to seek strength from God, believing that he alone could protect them. The king's unwavering focus on divine support spread through the city, turning fear into a quiet determination. To the Assyrians, it may have looked like desperation, but within Jerusalem, it was a moment of unity and hope. Sometimes, in the most vulnerable places, that's where true strength is found. As the siege wore on, Hezekiah's actions became a testament to leadership under divine guidance. He could have surrendered, bowed to Assyrian demands, or sought earthly allies, but he chose a different path, one that showed his people a kind of courage not based on weapons or wealth, but on trust in God. This choice wasn't just about survival, it was about keeping the heart of Jerusalem alive. When leaders today face impossible odds, what might they learn from Hezekiah's example of steadfast faith? The people of Jerusalem must have clung to every word from Hezekiah, looking to him for reassurance as the Assyrians continued their siege. In a world that measured power by swords and armies, Hezekiah's focus on prayer and faith set him apart. The city's defenses may have been tangible, but its true fortress was invisible, their belief in God's protection. What does it mean for us today to find strength not in what we see but in what we trust beyond sight? Every day, as the siege continued, the people of Jerusalem grew stronger in spirit, even as supplies dwindled and the tension mounted. Hezekiah's unshakable faith reminded them of the God who had parted seas, brought down walls, and delivered them before. With every prayer, they felt less alone, as if angels might already be standing guard. It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't just a passive hope. It's an active force that holds us steady, even when the odds are against us. As the siege of Jerusalem reached its peak, the tension was palpable, both inside and outside the city walls. The Assyrians saw a victory within reach, while the people of Jerusalem clung to the belief that God would not abandon them. Hezekiah's faith lit a spark of hope that defied logic, and in those final, uncertain hours, Jerusalem was more than a city under siege. It was a beacon of unyielding faith. And then, on a night when hope was thin and fear was thick, something miraculous happened. Hezekiah's faith was more than a personal conviction. It was a beacon for an entire city facing a powerful enemy. When others looked at the Assyrian army with dread, Hezekiah looked upward, confident that God would hear his prayers. His faith wasn't blind optimism. It was a trust built on the promises of God, a reliance he encouraged his people to share. He stood as a reminder that when human strength falters, divine support can carry us through. Could it be that, in our own lives, we also have access to this kind of resilient faith? As the siege wore on, Hezekiah's example inspired Jerusalem's people to stay grounded in their beliefs. Facing hunger, fear, and uncertainty, they could have given in to despair. Instead, they found a quiet strength in prayer. In moments of silence when they turned their fears over to God, Hezekiah's trust wasn't just about survival. It was about aligning his heart with God's will, believing that even in crisis, divine guidance would lead them. How different would our challenges look if we faced them with this same faith? Hezekiah didn't just pray for victory, he prayed for wisdom, for the courage to lead his people, and for the strength to stand firm. His approach was a lesson in humility, recognizing that while he was king, the true power rested with God. In today's world, where self-reliance is often prized, Hezekiah's faith teaches us the importance of surrender, of acknowledging that sometimes the answers lie beyond our control. Perhaps there's a freedom in letting go and trusting that, like Hezekiah, we're not alone in our struggles. Throughout the siege, Hezekiah's focus remained steady. He wasn't swayed by the taunts of the Assyrians or the fear that gripped his people. He chose to direct his energy towards prayer, knowing that this was his greatest weapon. In our own battles, we often look for solutions outside ourselves. But Hezekiah's story is a reminder that sometimes the most profound answers come from within, by connecting with a power greater than ourselves. Could this inward turn toward faith be our missing link to strength? Hezekiah's faith transformed his leadership. By looking to God, he demonstrated a type of courage that wasn't based on military strategy or wealth but on conviction. His belief in God's protection gave his people hope, even as they faced what seemed like certain defeat. Today, leaders can find inspiration in Hezekiah's example, realizing that true strength comes not from control, but from a willingness to lean on something beyond oneself. What would our world look like if more leaders had faith like Hezekiah? As his people prayed, Hezekiah embodied the principle that faith is an active force. He didn't sit back passively, he led his people in prayer, showing that faith involves action, a continuous turning to God even when the future is uncertain. His resilience reminds us that faith is a practice, a decision we make repeatedly, especially in hard times. Perhaps, like Hezekiah, we can cultivate this kind of faith by making it part of our daily lives, building a foundation that holds firm even in storms. Hezekiah's story teaches that faith often requires perseverance. With every passing day of the siege, he encouraged his people to hold on to their trust in God, even as the Assyrian army grew impatient and the situation grew more dire. In today's fast-paced world, where we crave quick solutions, Hezekiah's patience offers a valuable lesson. Faith isn't always about immediate answers. It's about the willingness to stay the course, trusting that a breakthrough will come in its own time. How might our lives change if we adopted this patient faith? While Hezekiah had every reason to fear, he chose faith over fear, inspiring those around him to do the same. It's easy to believe in God's power when times are good, but true faith shines in adversity. Hezekiah's courage reminded his people that, despite appearances, they were not at the mercy of the Assyrians. Instead, they were held by a God who could change their fate in an instant. Imagine if we approached our fears with this mindset, seeing each challenge as an opportunity to strengthen our trust in something greater. As Jerusalem waited, Hezekiah's faith acted as a shield, a defense that no physical barrier could replicate. His belief in God's promise became a fortress for his people, a source of comfort that even the Assyrian soldiers outside the walls couldn't shake. In our own lives, we often rely on external protections, forgetting that the most unbreakable fortresses are built on inner strength and faith. What would it look like to build our lives on this foundation, trusting that God's protection is our ultimate security? Hezekiah's faith wasn't just about what he believed, but about how that belief impacted his people. Through his example, he gave Jerusalem more than just hope. He gave them a reason to stand firm. His faith wasn't a personal refuge but a shared strength, something that uplifted the entire city. This story of trust and divine connection is a call for us to consider the impact of our own faith on others. What if our belief, like Hezekiah's, could inspire courage and hope in those around us? In the stillness of the night, as Jerusalem lay waiting and fearful, an unseen force moved through the Assyrian camp. It was an angel, sent by God, a presence powerful enough to shift the course of history. Without a sound, this angel struck down 185,000 soldiers, demonstrating a divine power beyond human comprehension. This wasn't just a defense of Jerusalem, it was a declaration that God's strength is unmatched, capable of delivering in ways that defy all expectations. How often do we overlook the potential for miracles when we're in desperate need? This moment of divine intervention was a turning point not only for Jerusalem, but for anyone who heard the tale. People knew the Assyrians as a force of terror, yet in a single day an angel accomplished what no army could. Divine intervention is often subtle, unseen, yet here it was undeniable, leaving a silence that spoke volumes. The message was clear: when God decides to act, no power can stand in his way. What might it mean for us if we believed in such possibilities in our own lives? Imagine the shock among Jerusalem's people when they looked out to see the Assyrian army, once a terrifying threat, now completely vanquished. The angel's work was swift, efficient, and final. This wasn't just about saving a city. It was about reminding the world of a power greater than empires. We too face challenges that seem impossible, and yet, this story shows us that there are forces beyond what we see, capable of changing everything in an instant. How might our lives shift if we embrace this unseen potential? The angel's intervention wasn't just an act of destruction, it was a profound symbol of God's protection. The people of Jerusalem saw firsthand that their faith was not in vain, that their prayers had reached a listening ear. For Hezekiah and his people, this wasn't just a miracle. It was a confirmation that God was with them, actively safeguarding their future. When we face our own battles, could there be unseen forces working in our favor, guiding us through situations we can't control? This miracle was more than a story of survival. It was a demonstration of God's boundless power. The Assyrians, renowned for their brutality and strength, were no match for a single angel. The silent message to Jerusalem and to the surrounding nations was that the might of God could turn the tables in an instant. How many times do we feel overwhelmed, forgetting that there is a greater strength available to us if we seek it? This story serves as a reminder of the hidden power that faith can tap into. The dawn after that night was unlike any other. Jerusalem, once braced for destruction, now found itself saved in the most unexpected way. The people were left with a sense of awe, a respect for the mystery of God's ways. Sometimes, solutions to our problems come from directions we could never anticipate. Divine intervention doesn't always look like we imagine, but it's always precisely what's needed. What if we, too, looked for solutions beyond the visible, trusting in the possibility of the miraculous? This act of divine intervention sent ripples far beyond Jerusalem. Other nations would hear of the single night when the Assyrian army fell without a battle, leaving an empire to wonder at the power behind such a miracle. The story became a testament to God's ability to protect His people, even against overwhelming odds. In our own lives, how often do we limit our expectations based on what seems possible, forgetting that there are powers beyond what we can predict? For Hezekiah, this moment was more than a victory. It was a validation of his faith and leadership. He had chosen to trust in God rather than negotiate or surrender, and this intervention was a divine endorsement of his decision. In our own decisions, we sometimes stand at a crossroads, unsure if our choices will lead to success. Could there be a way for us, like Hezekiah, to step forward in faith, trusting that when we act with conviction, unseen forces may support us? The angel's intervention also raised a question for future generations. Where does true power lie? The Assyrians had strength, numbers, and skill, yet they were no match for God's will. This story invites us to reconsider our own sources of strength. Are we leaning on material resources, or are we open to a power that transcends them? What would happen if we, too, relied on faith as our greatest defense against the trials we face? Jerusalem's deliverance serves as a lasting reminder that God's timing and methods are beyond our understanding. The people of Jerusalem had no idea how they would be saved, yet they trusted, and in a single day, their faith was rewarded. This story challenges us to consider how often we rely on visible means when facing challenges, forgetting the potential for divine intervention. When we find ourselves surrounded by struggles, could it be that there's an angel waiting to intervene in our lives as well? This remarkable event didn't just leave a mark in the biblical narrative. It also echoed through historical records outside Jerusalem. Historians, archaeologists, and scholars have studied accounts like Sennacherib's Prism, an ancient artifact that details the Assyrian king's campaigns. Interestingly, while it boasts of victories over other cities, it stops short of claiming victory over Jerusalem. It's a curious omission, suggesting that something unusual happened, a possible acknowledgement of an event so profound that even the conqueror's record couldn't ignore it. Sennacherib's Prism is a clay cylinder inscribed with the king's achievements, intended to showcase his strength and validate his reign. In it, Sennacherib lists the cities he defeated, using language that conveys power and ruthlessness. Yet, when it comes to Jerusalem, he states that he shut up Hezekiah like a caged bird without describing a conquest. This absence speaks volumes, hinting that the Assyrian army met a unique fate, one that Sennacherib couldn't quite explain. How often does history leave us with such powerful gaps, inviting us to wonder at the mysteries it holds? Beyond Sennacherib's Prism, other ancient historians mention the Assyrian army's sudden downfall, adding credibility to the biblical account. Herodotus, a Greek historian, refers to a mysterious plague that struck the Assyrian forces, weakening them in a way that defied explanation. While his version may differ, it's fascinating to see such a significant event referenced across cultures. It suggests that even outside the Bible, people recognized that something extraordinary had happened, a moment in time that defied natural logic. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants of the Assyrian Empire that support the reputation of their military power, showing how vast and advanced their forces were. Their weapons, fortifications, and records tell of an empire built on strength. The fact that such a formidable army could fall in a single night challenges our understanding of ancient warfare. It wasn't a typical battle, but an act of divine intervention, something that historical records seem to acknowledge in their own way. What does this say about the nature of history itself and the forces that shape it? The Assyrians were known for their meticulous record-keeping, chronicling their victories and conquests with precision. Yet, when it comes to Jerusalem, the narrative falls silent, as if acknowledging a defeat too significant to fully grasp. This silence in their records is as telling as any detail, suggesting that they met a force they couldn't control or predict. For modern historians, this omission is a puzzle, a subtle yet profound indication of the event's impact. Could it be that even empires must concede when facing the inexplicable? Interestingly, later generations preserved these accounts, passing them down as warnings and lessons about the limits of human power. The story of Jerusalem's deliverance wasn't just a tale for the faithful. It became a part of historical consciousness, reminding nations that might doesn't always win. Over time, this event shaped perspectives on power, survival, and faith, serving as a reminder that history itself is often written by forces beyond human control. Might there be other stories in history where the unseen played a decisive role? For believers, this historical evidence serves as more than validation. It's a confirmation of God's intervention in the world. Seeing the story backed by artifacts and records adds depth to their faith, grounding spiritual beliefs in tangible history. It's as if these artifacts whisper that what we read in the Bible is more than legend. How powerful is it to know that even secular history bears traces of divine acts? This is not just faith, but faith confirmed by the remnants of the past. Historical records also invite us to consider the nature of miracles. A divine act may defy explanation, yet it leaves a trace, an impact that resonates through time. Sennacherib's failure to conquer Jerusalem isn't merely a story of survival. It's a testament to an event that couldn't be neatly recorded or explained away. For those of us studying these records, it raises a question. How do we define what's real? Are miracles simply unexplained phenomena? Or do they point to a reality beyond our understanding? The survival of Jerusalem reshaped the region's history, altering the path of countless lives. Had the Assyrians succeeded, the story of Israel might have been very different. This single event shifted the course of history, a reminder that divine intervention isn't just personal, it can influence entire nations. When we look at history, we often see it as a series of human choices, yet stories like this hint at an unseen influence guiding events. How many times has history been shaped by forces that escape our logic? Jerusalem's deliverance left an impression on the ancient world, resonating through time as both a historical event and a spiritual milestone. The convergence of biblical and secular records invites us to see history not just as facts, but as a tapestry woven with divine threads. This story reminds us that history and faith aren't isolated. They intersect, creating a narrative that challenges us to see beyond mere dates and names. And so, this moment stands as a testament to a power that transcends human ambition, a power that, perhaps, still shapes the world in ways we may never fully understand. Now, after hearing this remarkable story, let me ask you, do you believe that unseen forces could be working in your favor too? Think about the challenges you face, the battles that seem impossible. What if, like Hezekiah, you could turn those struggles over to a higher power and see what divine intervention could do? This story isn't just about ancient times. It's a reminder that faith, even in the darkest moments, can change everything. So, what steps can you take to bring this kind of faith into your own life? Can you find ways to seek support beyond what you can see or control? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's build a community that taps into this ancient wisdom. If you found value in this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can keep learning about the incredible, sometimes hidden truths that history and faith reveal.